Russian military at least provided some safe passage temporarily out of war-ravaged Aleppo for thousands of sick and injured residents. They boarded buses and ambulances this morning to travel through government-controlled areas. Some rebel fighters were allowed to leave as well, but only under the watchful eye of Russian military drones. You can see these pictures aiding the Syrian regime. President Bashar al Asad released a video message a short time ago celebrating what he calls the, quote, liberation of Aleppo, what the U.S. would certainly call the collapse of Aleppo. ITN's Dan Rivers filed this report.
Across this city and across the world has finally the fighting and suffering that has punctuated this war and has drawn in people from around the world to watch the plight of the people trapped inside. It's all finally over. The wider war in Syria, though, is very far from that.
MSNBC's Ayman Mohadin has been watching all of this. Ayman, the tragedy of Aleppo is unspeakable. It reminds me of Srebrenica and of other, mass horrors that the world stood by and permitted to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we saw Samantha Power.
Yeah, I mean, her words were very moving at the UN, but it certainly reflects the breakdown of the international order in trying to address the larger Syrian conflict, because it really underscores the paralysis in trying to reach an agreement, not just on the resolution of the war politically, but trying to alleviate the human suffering. Look at how many times ceasefires have started and stopped, failed because one side or the other breaches it or violates it, and all the time the people inside various communities of Aleppo and elsewhere trapped, unable to get out. Today we're starting to see just the first glimpses of these people getting out. 1,000 or so have been out so far, according to aid workers on the ground. But you're talking about an area that has about 50,000 people, anywhere from 50 to 100,000 people. So 1,000 people leaving this morning, that's a drop in the bucket for what the people there are going through.
And John Kerry trying repeatedly, for years now, to try to get something going, really hamstrung by resistance initially from the White House to use more of a real threat of military force. And the dysfunction now leaving the rebels in no man's land, and they reacting angrily in New York a couple of months ago to Kerry.
Yeah.
He's the one person who's been trying to negotiate something.
Yeah, the Syrian opposition, both the rebels on the ground, the fighters, as well as the political leadership that's in exile, they feel they've been abandoned by the international community, and at the helm of it, the United States. For a long time throughout this fight, they have been supported by the United States militarily, financially, the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Turks, all adding resources to the rebels. But they didn't back up that fight with the willpower to go to their defense when it came to on-the-ground fighting. On the opposite side, you have the Syrians, backed by Russian air power, backed by the Iranian government, backed by Hezbollah fighters, who actually put blood into that fight. They put troops on the ground, they put money in the purses of the government, and so they were able to take the fight to the rebels systematically over those years. And when the push came to shove in a standoff like Aleppo, the United States did not come to the defense, at least according to Syrian opposition figures I've been speaking to. The U.S. and the Saudis and the Qataris didn't come to the defense of those rebels in a meaningful way against the might.
The Syrian army has released video of a firefight between rebel and government forces in Aleppo. It's part of a major Russian-backed effort by the Syrian government to retake the strategic city, which has become a focal point in the years-long war. Aleppo is the last urban stronghold of a revolt against Syrian President Bashar al Asad that began in 2011. Over the last several months, rebel fighters claimed Moscow and the Syrian army have been targeting power plants, hospitals, and bakeries in Aleppo to force the nearly 250,000 people trapped there to surrender. Rights groups have condemned an airstrike on an Aleppo hospital, which France says constitutes a war crime. Rescue workers say at least 34 people were killed in the fighting.
Ceasefire, no mercy, as the bombs rain down again today on what's left of rebel-held Aleppo. Explosions caught live on camera. Some in Aleppo now seem resigned to their fate.
So death will be a peace for us.
The apparent ceasefire deal between rebels and regime collapsed quickly These 47 orphans hid underground in this video posted by an Arab human rights group. I'm Yasmin and I'm 10, she says. We're scared. We can't leave because of the bombing. Please get us out of here. The UN says 50,000 civilians are still trapped and in trouble. But President Assad says he won't stop the assault on Aleppo's last rebels. Even if the city falls soon, it doesn't mean the end of the war. ISIS still controls swathes of eastern Syria and just retook Palmyra. Rebels still hold large areas in the north and south, and Kurds control strips on the border with Turkey. Assad wants them all back. With no evacuation, Aleppo's civilians tonight fear a massacre. They are powerless to stop it. Bill Neely, NBC News.
To everyone who can hear me, we are here exposed to a genocide in the besieged city of Aleppo. This may be my last video. More than 50,000 of civilians who rebelled against the dictator Al Asad are threatened with field executions or dying under bombing.
ما كنا متخيلين انه يكون الثمن غالي كل هالقد، ما كنا متخيلين انه نحن نستاهل كل هذا الموت كرمال بس انه نحن طلعنا وطالبنا بحرية.
Imagine an artillery bomb may enter from my window, or a barrel bomb dropping over my buildings.
More than 100,000 people were displaced in this attack of the regime. Those people, most of them staying outside, have no homes, have no food, facing the cold, facing the hunger. We try to help them as much we can, but we couldn't.
مرحبا، أنا زين عم أحكي معكم اليوم 10 ديسمبر من مدينة حلب المحاصرة، بالأحرى باللي بقي من مدينة حلب. الحقيقة بآخر كم يوم فصائل المعارضة خسرت أكثر من 50% من الأحياء المحررة بمدينة حلب. ما بعرف ليش، يعني يمكن لأنه نحن بالنهاية عم نحارب دول قوة كتير كبيرة بالعالم، يعني من روسيا، إيران، النظام. أنا بكره كلمة نحارب، لأنه نحن بالبداية ما طلعنا لحتى نحارب. نحن كل شي كان بدنا إياه إنه في عنا نظام حكم ديكتاتوري كان بدنا نتخلص منه. طلعنا طالبنا بحرية، بكرامة، بعدالة، بديمقراطية. ما كنا متخيلين انه يكون الثمن غالي كل هالقد، ما كنا متخيلين انه نحن نستاهل كل هذا الموت كرمال بس انه نحن طلعنا وطالبنا بحرية. حتى معظم المنظمات اللي هون بمدينة حلب يعني ما عاد في عندها مخزون احتياطي. يعني انا مثلا بشتغل بوحدة من هي المنظمات ميرسي USA، فمن كم يوم كنا عم نوزع بالمرجع. طبعا كان التوزيع هنيك انتحاري خلال اقل من ساعتين. يلي قدرت عدهم أنا طبعاً 12 برميل، 50 قذيفة، وصواريخ الرجم أنا ما قدرت عدهم لأنه هدول يعني بينضربوا بشكل متواتر، لأنه أنا ما كنت عم لحق عدهم. كل شيء كان بدي إياه بس إنه نحن نخلص توزيع ونطلع دون ما حدا من هدول الناس يتأذى. يعني كان بدي إياهم بس بقى يرجعوا على بيوتهم. صراحة كل شيء بحلب عم يحتضر، أولادها، أهلها، حتى حاراتها. حلب عم تحتضر. حلب بأبشع حالاتها، فيني أقول بال6 سنين كلياتها بداية الثورة. هي أبشع إيام تمر علينا.
After so many false dawns, the siege of Aleppo is over. But even this morning, President Assad's artillery couldn't resist one last go at killing those still trapped. Inside the rebel enclave, those he'd targeted for 4.5 years prepared to leave. And these pictures show while fighters were among them, most appeared to be civilians. They included women, children, the injured and the vulnerable, all caught up in the catastrophe of this conflict. The scale of the destruction they were leaving was laid bare, as was the enmity with which they now regard those who've besieged them.
It's true that we're leaving Aleppo, but once we grow up, we're going to come back and liberate Aleppo. God willing, we're going to come back and liberate Aleppo. Me and all of my brothers, all of us.
Outside, the regime buses were lined up and ready. A solitary vehicle carrying a Red Crescent flag emerged from rebel lines. Terms agreed, it was time to end the suffering. The buses threaded their way through the debris to start the evacuation. For 2.5 hours, we waited and watched, as did the world, hoping this would not collapse into more fighting as it did yesterday. But smoke billowing from fires set by rebels hinted at a scorched earth policy to deny the regime the use of anything they were leaving behind. It's hard to imagine there was much left to burn. The call to prayer cut through the silence as a tense city held its breath and hoped for peace. Then, the first sign, flashing lights, a convoy of ambulances and buses emerging onto Aleppo's ring road. Well, this is the moment the world has been waiting for. The civilians are leaving their enclave, an ignominious defeat for the rebels. But finally, the battle for Aleppo is over. The occupants of the buses came almost face to face with the men who'd sought to kill them, but they were allowed to leave unhindered. And it didn't take long for President Assad's supporters to start their celebrations.
I feel very happy. I feel that this victory will continue to all Syria.
It's a day of great joy. We were waiting for this day minute by minute. We couldn't believe this day would come. I congratulate all the Syrian people.
But after so much bloodshed, this shouldn't have been a day of celebration, rather a time to reflect on why this took so long.